If I were to use the words Enoch, Altered, and Anomaly, and you not know what I'm talking about, congratulations, you're in the right place. For my fellow Outriders that have had some experience as a gun-toting demigod, don't worry, there's some stuff here for you too. I'm of course here to talk about the looter shooter from developer People Can Fly, Outriders. For those of you who haven't pulled the trigger yet, here's a quick rundown of what exactly Outriders is. If you already own the game or don't need this kind of explanation, skip to the timestamp listed on screen right now. For the unaware, Outriders is a co-op, third-person looter shooter with a big emphasis on player power fantasy. In addition to powerful guns, players have access to a series of powerful class abilities, 3 of which can be equipped at any given time. Most of the abilities have short cooldowns or multiple charges, so you'll find that ability use is almost as frequent as gun use. Speaking of guns, they range from run-of-the-mill machine guns, sniper rifles, shotguns, etc. to guns that look like this or this, and can do things like that. It gets kind of crazy. And while the general gunplay isn't quite on par with games like The Division or Destiny, once you get the hang of throwing around abilities and implementing the use of guns that do more than just shoot bullets, you probably won't care. Each class has access to a unique class tree and a plethora of gear to customize the way you play. The game is very aggressive, even at one point marketing itself by saying, "Cover is for cowards." In terms of story, no spoilers, don't worry. I will say the world is very interesting, and the narrative kept me guessing, especially for the first half. And once you've finished the campaign, Outriders is a series of fun, challenging, and rewarding expedition missions to keep you coming back. Outriders supports full crossplay, so if you've got friends that you want to play with, platform doesn't really matter. Outriders is not open world, but takes place in a linear series of maps that can be explored and revisited with side quests and hunts littered throughout, similar to the Borderlands games. And while yes, it is a looter shooter existing with an expanding genre of other looter shooters, comparing it to other games of the genre and just stopping there would be a huge mistake. For example, when you hear looter shooter, if you think Destiny, while Outriders does share some surface level similarities with Destiny, it's very different in a lot of key ways. There's no PvP, so you don't have to worry about any balancing issues between PvP and PvE. It is not a game of service, and I think there's been a player nerf once. My point isn't to shade Destiny, but to point out that comparing these two games is like comparing any two other shooters simply on the basis that they both have guns. Let's look at what I would consider a more appropriate parallel to Outriders. Diablo 3. Diablo 3 and Outriders both have a replayable campaign with chapter selection. In-game is focused on a rewarding loot grind that combines RNG drops and merchants. Gear feels very powerful with set bonuses and individual piece bonuses. Difficulty is based on world tiers, so challenge grows with the player, and there's a big emphasis on co-op. Outriders is basically a Diablo-style ARPG that just so happens to also be a third-person sci-fi shooter. If that sounds awesome to you, it's because it is, and you'd probably like this game a lot. It's available on all major platforms, current and last gen, except for the Nintendo Switch. It's also on Game Pass for Xbox and PC, so if you have either of those, check it out. There's also a demo on all platforms that transfers progress from demo to full game. If you're just ready to go all in on this game, you can purchase the World Slayer edition, which includes the full base game as well as the upcoming World Slayer expansion, and is priced around $60 USD, with some platforms offering a pre-order discount. Okay, with all that out of the way, here's everything you need to know to get started on Outriders. When you start the game, you'll create your character appearance. A lot of this can be changed at any time when you are in camp, so don't sweat it if you can't choose a hairstyle or a beard or whatever. From here, you'll play for about 30 minutes of story-heavy content, but after that, you'll pick your class. Class determines your skills, skill tree, gear drops, aside from guns, because all classes can use all guns, and your healing condition. This choice, unlike your appearance, cannot be changed, so try to give this one some thought. Don't worry, you can always make multiple characters and then just try them all out until you decide which one you like best, so you can pick a main later. For now, just know that you should pick your class based on playstyle alone, not appearance. The 4 classes are Technomancer, Pyromancer, Trickster, and Devastator. The Pyromancer uses fire-based abilities to burn and entomb in ash all who oppose them, with abilities like a wall of fire, turning enemies into a bomb, or a literal volcano beneath your target's feet, just to name a few. They excel at mid to long range and are a great choice for anyone looking to deal high damage with a heavy lean on ability use and damage over time. They heal by damaging enemies affected by their abilities. The Devastator is like an earthbender with a gun. They excel at close range and are the closest thing Outriders has to a tank-style class. With abilities like armor made of rock, a directed tremor, and gravity leap, they can take a beating and give it right back. They also have a knack for crowd control. Their heal condition is killing enemies at close range. You probably see a pattern here, right? First fire, then earth, so you can probably guess what the next class controls, right? That's right, space and time. The Trickster can manipulate space and time in small ways like displacement of themselves or enemies, or creating pockets of slowed time, affecting individual enemies or small areas. Additionally, the Trickster can utilize blades of temporal energy on their arms to flay the skin off of their enemies. With an emphasis on high-risk, high-reward playstyle, the Trickster excels at close to mid-range with hit-and-run tactics. Their heal condition is killing enemies at close range, which also grants them some overshield. The Technomancer controls scrap to create constructs, some automated and some the Technomancer uses as temporary weapons. These contraptions often deal toxic or freeze damage, making this class very versatile when it comes to doing crowd control status effect or damage over time status effect. Creating things like turrets or a giant scrap forged minigun, the Technomancer excels at mid to long range, doing its best work when kept away from danger. Though it's a great solo class, the Technomancer has the only heal on demand ability in the game, which affects the whole team, so they could fill a support role as well. Their heal condition is just dealing damage. That's it. While we're on the topic of classes, I'll go ahead and give you a few tips on things to look out for. As you look at your skills menu, you'll see words in yellow that are the categories of individual skills. These are important when deciding your path in the class tree, because certain paths are more catered towards certain skills. Let's use my Technomancer as an example, since he's my main. As you can see, I'm at max level, but I'm only able to reach the end of one tree. At max level, you'll have 20 points, so be ready to specialize, but don't worry, this can be changed at any time. My chosen tree is Tech Shaman, because my Technomancer is very focused on team support and cryo turret, so the vast majority of perks affecting those skills can be found here. In addition to perks affecting skills, there are perks for overall stats, damage with certain weapon types, and bonuses to status effects. Speaking of status effects, on screen here is a list of all the statuses and what they do. Keep in mind that players can also be affected by these status effects, but we are able to clear them with certain actions. For burn, we do a dodge roll. For freeze and ash, do a melee attack. For toxic, you just need to heal. And for bleed, just stand still and you'll stop taking damage and wait for it to go away. So let's talk world tiers, soon to be called apocalypse tiers in World Slayer. Before World Slayer comes out, there are 15 world tiers that you'll need to climb through. The higher the tier, the higher the difficulty and reward. Once you hit max character level, you'll need to advance through the higher world tiers to get max level gear. So I suggest trying to keep to pace with these world tiers, even if you have to push yourself a little bit. At this point, you've probably picked up a good bit of loot. For now, if you're early in the game, just equip the gear with the highest score. Concerning old gear you've stopped using, you have two choices: sell or dismantle. Selling gives you scrap, which is the basic currency of vendors on your journey. However, dismantling gives you not only materials for upgrading your gear, but also mods and shards. My rule of thumb is to dismantle anything with a mod that I don't have, or a shard, represented by this symbol shown here. However, if you find yourself strapped for scrap or just wanting to have some set aside for later, try this method. Dismantle everything but the lowest rarity color that you actively find. For example, early on, you'll find white common gear with the occasional green drop and a blue drop if you're lucky. Once white common stops dropping and green becomes the norm, with blue occasional and then purple if you're lucky, sell greens, dismantle everything else. By the time blue becomes your norm, you'll hopefully not feel the need to sell a lot unless if you're spending excessively, which is fine. Just know that Outriders is extremely generous when it comes to the loot that it gives you. Alright, so you've got the basics. Now let's move on to something a little more advanced. The Workbench. I'd recommend not worrying about this until you've at least got all blue gear equipped. The Workbench can be a bit complicated at parts, so I've decided to just throw this to a YouTuber who I think really nailed it in one of his streams. Check it out. Okay guys, so to access the Workbench, you're going to talk to Dr. Zahidi in the camp. Say, I need to upgrade my gear. From here, you're going to see all of your equipped gear at the top, and then your entire inventory below that, separated by armor and weapons. When you select a piece of gear, you have these options over here. I'm going to explain what all of these mean. So improve rarity is pretty simple. You can increase the color rarity of your gear all the way from white to purple. You cannot increase it to legendary because legendaries are unique. Raise attributes. Each gun at purple and higher has 3 minor attributes that you can raise through the use of shards. So this gun specifically, you can increase the crit damage, the status power, and the skill's life leech. So you can see how much you can increase those by, if you scroll down to shards down here, that is the pool, the shard pool that you have from all of the stuff you dismantled. This is why it's so important to dismantle gear more than to sell it, because you see, if I was to dismantle the Ruin or Buzzard here, I'd get more for my crit damage pool. I could use some of that pool to increase all of these stats, and as you increase them, the shards actually go on the gun, so later on if you decide you don't want it anymore, when you salvage it, you'll get those shards back. To mod gear, each gun, purple and higher, has 2 mods on it. You've got mod slot 1 and mod slot 2. These are separated by tiers. Tier 1 is just low tier mods. They pretty basic stuff like inflict bleed on enemies, but it's got an 8-second cooldown. Tier 2 is a little more advanced. A lot of these though are going to
be improvements on tier 1 versions. As you can see, improved bleeding bullets, same thing, but the cooldown's cut in half. It's a 4-second cooldown. And then tier 3 is all legendary. So the only way to get tier 3 mods is to dismantle legendary weapons. For example, there's a gun called Damascus Offering. It always comes with its mod slot 1 as Claymore Torrent. That is the only way to get Claymore Torrent, is to dismantle Damascus Offering. But the cool thing about this game is that you can take legendary mods and put them on any gun. That includes other legendaries as well. My version of Damascus Offering not only has Claymore Turret, but Shadow Comet, which is another legendary mod. So whenever I shoot enemies, they get hit with energy swords as well as a literal comet falling from the sky. So it's a lot of AoE damage. Our next thing is swap variant. You can't do this for legendaries because legendaries are locked in, as you can see. So if you go to swap variant, each gun type has a different variant that you can use for it. For example, standard assault rifle is just a regular machine gun. Tactical is burst fire, and sharpshooter is semi-automatic. And you can see on the weapon stats how that affects everything over there. Lastly, we have level up. The reason this is so important is because character level maxes out at 30, but gear level, as you can see, maxes out at 50. So once you hit 30, you're going to need to level up some of your gear as you get higher level gear from playing the game. So like expeditions, when you hit level 30, may start dropping level 31 gear. If there's gear that you want to level up with you, you'll have to use this level up process, and it'll cost a lot of titanium. So I would recommend having a lot of titanium by the time you get to end game, if possible. Armor is basically the same. Obviously, there's no variance. You can still improve the rarity. You can raise the attributes, same deal. But with mod gear, the categories are a bit different with the mods. Tier 1 is all class specific. As you can see, I'm playing my Technomancer. All of these are Technomancer mods. Tier 2 is universal stuff. For example, here, Ashen Boost. Boost your damage against enemies afflicted with Ash by 20%. Anyone can get that. Tier 3 is a mixture of universal mods as well as legendary class-specific mods. These bottom mods in Tier 3 are only on legendary pieces of gear. For example, 2 turrets can be placed before triggering the cooldown. That is how I'm able to place 2 turrets. I was able to pull that off a legendary piece and put that on the gear that I'm holding right now. So that's the Workbench. It's a little complicated, but once you get the hang of it, you can make some pretty awesome combinations. Playing around with it, getting used to it, because that'll definitely heighten your experience in the game.
Wow. What a well-constructed explanation. You should subscribe to those guys. They make great content. All right, Outrider, let's wrap this thing up with some general tips and tricks to help get you ready for World Slayer. If you're tired of picking up loot drops individually, there's actually an auto loot button that you can press to pick up everything automatically. For consoles, this button is down on the D-pad. Also regarding loot, on the bottom right of your inventory, you can select these boxes corresponding to loot color. This will mark all unequipped pieces of that color as junk, so you can sell or dismantle them all at once. Just be careful that you don't accidentally junk something you want to keep. Once you've beaten the campaign, you'll unlock expeditions. These are the best way to get loot. These are relatively short missions that reward you with currency to spend at a special shop, as well as a pile of loot at the end of each run. Keep advancing in tiers as you can, because the higher the tier, the higher the level of the gear, and the better chance to drop legendaries. If you're looking for legendaries, but expeditions are a bit too hard for you at the time, there are a few quests that can guarantee a legendary drop upon completion. Those can be seen here on screen. Spend as little titanium as possible until you get to endgame. Having an abundant supply of that when you start the loot grind will be very helpful. You may have noticed the top right of your inventory, the Customize button. Here you can change the look of your weapons and armor at any time, as long as you found that piece before. However, this customization list is account bound. So let's say you're playing the Trickster and finding Trickster specific gear. Well, next time you play your Pyromancer, for example, you'll see that that gear that you found on your Trickster is available cosmetically for your Pyromancer. But let's say, for example, you have no desire to play the Technomancer, but you think the Grim Inventor gas mask would look sick on a Pyromancer. Rather than having to level up and grind on a class. Rather than having to level up and grind a class that you don't want to play, you can simply make a low-level version of that class and then join a friend's game who has reached expeditions and buy legendaries from the drop pod shop at a heavily discounted price, and those legendaries will be unlocked cosmetically for your entire account. So there you have it. A whole bunch of information to get you started on the most underrated looter shooter in the market. In a genre of games that's filled with excessive monetization, overtuned balancing, or just generally not caring from the devs, Outriders is just a good old-fashioned video game. And with World Slayer right around the corner, there's about to be a ton of new content to tackle. So let's get out there and face the storm together. See you on the field, Outrider.